Here we see Tom Thibodeau on the sidelines of a New York Knicks basketball game actually expressing his joy. Nothing says a happy New York Knicks head coach like a scowl on his face. On today's House of Takes NBA show, we are going to discuss the New York Knicks and why I believe at this stage of the season, the Knicks, believe it or not, are actually legitimate contenders in the Eastern Conference. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in to the House of Takes NBA show. Please, we're heading towards 1,200 subscribers. It's a big number, I know. We're a small show, trying to be big someday. So please go ahead and subscribe and, of course, like this video. All right. So Tom Thibodeau has done an absolutely fantastic job with this New York Knicks team this season, last season, and quite frankly, ever since he arrived in New York. Now, we know that the New York Knicks recently have had a couple key injuries, which actually sort of stunted their growth as they were sort of putting the new pieces together that they acquired through various trades before the trading deadline. OG has been a fantastic addition to this New York Knicks team. Now, OG is going to be out for, we don't know how many games, but assume it's a couple more games before we see him again. But the Knicks are a completely different team now than they were at the start of the season. And we can talk about Jalen Brunson, and we can talk about the Villanova connection and Donte, and of course Josh Hart. But one thing that this New York Knicks team actually has is it has the mentality of its head coach. And sometimes in sports, the mentality of your head coach is an extremely important thing. You know, a lot of people out there like to talk about the Miami culture. And really, what is the Miami culture? Because, you know, players come and go. So what is the Miami culture? If you were to actually try to figure out exactly what that is, what you might end up with is it's a reflection of its management, you know, Pat Riley, the president of the Miami Heat, and its head coach and the rest of their coaching staff, which is a reflection of the kind of players that they actually put on their team. If you look at the way Jalen Brunson plays and the way Donte DiVincenzo plays and the way that Josh Hart plays, I mean, for God's sakes, he played 48 minutes in San Francisco against the Golden State Warriors, had a triple-double, and he didn't miss a single minute of the game. He played the entire game, did Josh Hart. Look, Josh Hart's not about averaging, 20 points a night, though he can do that for you. Josh Hart is about doing all the small things. But what those three players have in common is something that Jimmy Butler has, and it's also something that a lot of the other players on the Miami Heat have, which is a grittiness about them. They are not going to be walked over by anybody in the NBA. So when you take a look at this New York Knicks roster and you say, well, how did they actually go into San Francisco and beat the Golden State Warriors? Well, first of all, they needed Steph Curry to have a bad day, and that's exactly what happened. But beyond all of that, they had Miles McBride actually step up and score 29. Who had Miles McBride on their bingo card scoring 29 in San Francisco against the Golden State Warriors? The point I would make here is simply to say they have players that will step up when other players are out. It's the same thing that happens on a lot of teams. There's a lot of good players in the NBA that, quite frankly, need to be given the opportunity to shine. You might not think they can shine, but if they're given the opportunity to shine, they can. The question isn't whether or not they can shine in a single game. The question is whether or not those players can shine over an extended period of time. I seriously doubt that we'll see Miles McBride come even close to 30 points again during the regular season. But if something were to happen in the playoffs and they needed to play Miles McBride again, as much as they did against the Golden State Warriors, because he played 47 minutes in that game, then maybe you could see Miles McBride deliver a similar performance in the playoffs. But the Knicks as a whole, as a team, as I mentioned, are a direct reflection of Tom Thibodeau and his grittiness as a head coach in the association. Tom Thibodeau has this team, quite frankly, doing what a lot of other teams don't do in the NBA, which is actually playing some defense. Now, my Minnesota Timberwolves certainly play defense. The players on the Timberwolves team play hard. The Miami Heat, who will, occasionally phone some games in, do play hard as well on the defensive side of the ball, which is why they seem to always be ending up in the Eastern Conference Finals or even the NBA Finals, because they have a ragtag group of players between 5 and 10 on their roster that play hard and fit in well with what they're trying to accomplish. I think that this New York Knicks team is sort of like a poor man's version of Julius Randle, when he comes back, is a bit of a poor man's version of one Bam Adebayo. Jalen Brunson is a poor man's version of Jimmy Butler, but a younger version of Jimmy Butler. Jalen Brunson has been playing absolutely fantastic for the New York Knicks, as we all know. He has that grittiness that I talked about earlier, times 10. So does Josh Hart, and so does their other Villanova connection, which makes these guys triplets, which is, of course, Donte DiVincenzo. It is a solid team that the New York Knicks have. I think any other coach would not have this New York Knicks team where it's at this point. I think Tom Thibodeau, with a healthy New York Knicks roster entering the actual playoffs, is going to be extremely dangerous. They've got to get OG back, and they have to get Randle back. And if they can get both of those guys back, because you got to remember, Randle in previous seasons has entered the playoffs definitely banged up and definitely tired. There's the whole Julius Randle playoff talk, but that's usually because he's been overused just to get the team there in the first place. That will not be the case this particular season. And in fact, the Knicks will be most likely sitting in either third or fourth position in the Eastern Conference when the playoffs start. Now, I'm not saying that the Knicks can take down the Celtics, and I'm not saying that the Knicks can take down the Bucks, but they certainly could take down one of those teams. I highly doubt that they'd be able to take down both of those teams. But anybody else in the Eastern Conference is absolutely fair game for this New York Knicks team. Quite frankly, the New York Knicks are, in my opinion, at this point, because of the grittiness, assuming Randle comes back and OG is healthy, I have them above the Cleveland Cavaliers, who they're currently 2 games behind in the Eastern Conference. Once again, this New York Knicks team I have in third in the Eastern Conference, which absolutely makes them a legitimate contender in the Eastern Conference version or portion, if you will, of the playoffs this season. All right, North America, I want to know what you think about the New York Knicks being a legit contender in the Eastern Conference this season, as the playoffs are just about 15 games away. If you haven't already subscribed yet to the House of Takes channel, please go and subscribe, and of course like this video for the House of Takes NBA show. I'm Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.
You've been listening to the House of Takes NBA show with Dave Daba, presented by Stealth.ltd.